sometimes you just have to let the wood do the talking, and boy, it's talking on this one.
Now, this is American Arts and Crafts design, and it was always either white oak, sometimes red oak, but almost always quarter sawn grain, nice and straight. So learn all the details on how to make one of these today on the American Woodshop.
The American Woodshop with Scott Phillips is brought to you by
Woodcraft, since 1928, providing traditional and modern woodworking tools and supplies to generations of craftsmen. Woodcraft, helping you make wood work.
For every woodworking reason, for every woodworking age. Rycon Power Tools, pro tools for everyone. RyconTools.com, proud supporters of American woodshops everywhere. Woodcraft Magazine, projects, plans, and web links designed to help you make wood work. PS Wood, home of Timberwolf Swedish silicon steel bandsaw blades and super sharp scroll saw blades. A bed to sleep on. A table to share meals. A house that feels like a home. The Furniture Bank of Central Ohio, providing furniture to neighbors in need.
Now, Susie, what do you like about this table?
Well, it's the perfect end table, whether it's in your living room with the couch, the dining room, you know, over in the corner. It's just a perfect little end table, and I love the simple, clean lines.
Well, it's easy to take apart, to move it, that's one thing. But this defines the American arts and crafts movement right here by one thing. The wood, it's oak, usually white oak, quarter sawn, sometimes red oak, but it was always the straight grain look like Roycroft, Stickley that really brought this to the fore. Now off to the table saw we go. Now at the table saw, whatever you do, let that blade come to a stop when you get scrap off. I want everybody to know I'm serious about safety. Guards are a must. Be sure to read, understand, and follow all the instructions that come with the tools and products you use in your workshop. Safety glasses, hearing protection, always. Now the other thing is that riving knife is key. If you take some guard systems off, that goes away. You gotta have a riving knife. Use that, unless it's a non-through cut. And this actually has a non-through cut riving system as well. So here I'm cutting the work pieces down to do the glue up for the tabletop. Once I get that done, we'll do the glue up. If you look at this closely, you can see that this all flows together. Even though I have darker wood here, and this is bur oak, which is in the white oak family, for the top, the grain just has to flow together. And if it does, you're going to have a good stable glue up. Some people go growth rings up, down, and where you alternate the grain. Well, sometimes you just have to go with the flow, literally, to make sure the grain looks like it flows together, and that will give you a stable glue up. Trust me, that's from years of experience. So now, what I'm doing is using a number 20 setting on the biscuit joiner. And wherever I have a mark, I make a cut, like so. And I've done the same thing to the other side at the marks. That looks really good. Everything lines up. And I'm not worried about the look on the bottom. I want the look on the top to be great. Now with the glue sized on that part of the joint, you bring it down and rub it out, and that spreads glue out uniformly. And if you want to make your glue joint stronger, make sure you put glue on both parts of the joint. And I like to put a little bit of glue in those biscuit slot cuts. A little bit meaning a few drops. You don't want to overdo it. And then the key is working that glue into that seam, meaning brushing the glue out completely on the surface of the wood. Because a third of wood pretty much is glue, believe it or not. It's called lignin. And then the other third, one third's cellulose and the other third is extractives. And in oak, it's tannin or tannic acid. And it's that smell. And it also is what gives wine its flavor. So now we've got this brushed out nicely. And what I can do now is take the number 20 biscuits, pop them centered in the biscuit slots like this, tap it in, just like that. And now, making sure the lines all line up. And the cool thing about biscuits, you can move them left and right as much as 1/8 of an inch to line everything up. But what I'm doing, I already laid a compass circle out with a compass to give me the basic form with the cracks and splits in the waist zone. And now I can bring up a clamp and draw everything tight, being sure to alternate the clamps. So I want a bit of squeeze out there. And the key to a good glue up like this is making sure the edges are jointed perfectly. You saw that earlier. So now we'll draw this tight, and I'll let this dry for a good 2 hours before we cut it out using the circle cutting jig. 3 clamps total. There you go. A hallmark of Mission or Arts and Crafts furniture is quarter cut wood, which means nice straight grain with good raised structure. So that's what I'm using for the legs and for the stretchers and for the rails. Now, these rails that go underneath the table are 2 inches wide, 20 inches long. I need 2 identical pieces. Those get notched. Now, over here, you can see the stretchers. And these stretchers later are angled at 5 degrees, and I use miter gauge at the table saw for that. Identical, 1 3/4 by 11.5. All this was planed down to 7/8 inch thickness earlier. That's everything on this project except for the top, which is 5/4. Now on this piece, these are for the legs, 4 identical legs that are 3 inches wide, 22 inches long, and angle cut at a 5-degree angle. So I'll just make all those cuts now. And once that's done, it's moving on. The glue up is cured out and it's strong now, and I knocked the corners off at the bandsaw. You'll see why in a second. And I'm going to flip this over, and here you can see that squeeze out. Easiest way to get rid of it is with a card scraper, but you don't want it to dry more than a couple hours at most. Okay, that looks good. Don't use a wet rag. It would contaminate the finish. Now, if you look at this, you'll see, what is this? This is just a scrap piece of 3/4 inch plywood with a line that's absolutely perpendicular, squared to the flat of the blade. And that line is also centered up on the middle of the gullet, which is the valley between the teeth. That's key. Perpendicular, centered up on the gullet. And there's the entry cut that I made at a table saw, so I could slide that on and securely clamp that front and back with the clamps. That's why I knocked the corners off, so I could pivot this on that screw point that's coming through. Be careful of that screw point, because if you slide your hand across it, that is a cut waiting to happen. Be very careful there. So 22-inch diameter is what I'm looking for, which means it's 11 inches from the blade to that point right there, the pivot point. Now the layout is important. You see this line right here? That goes right through the center. So that's the diameter of the circle. So I go to the narrow edge, I just hit that screw point, be very careful. Okay, right here where that line comes through, and I bring this up and I start my entry cut just a 1/4 inch inside of that, and then I line up this line to my painter's tape that's in line with this line that's perpendicular to the blade, and everything works magically. Let's make that cut. Would you look at that? It's a miracle. It's a perfect circle. And, you know, over to the sander. I want to show you another jig to sand this perfectly smooth. This is a sanding jig. I've just fixed a sheet of plywood to the table of the 12-inch disc. Here's the fence right here. And before I start using it, dust collector on. Now watch what I do. I bring this up against the fence, and then I can rotate the workpiece in till it touches the disc. And this is flat out the best way to sand the circle, but you do have to keep it clean. I'll use a cleaning stick on this side of the disc, always on the down rotation, because this oak will flat out load that disc up in a heartbeat. So keep it clean. I'll get this sanded, then it's on to assembly. Now, the bandsaw is turned off. Respect that blade as it goes to a stop. And look at the table here. I just took out 4 pieces here, and these are all joined together with double-sided tape. And when you take it apart, never use a chisel, just use a flat bladed screwdriver. Get that tape off of there. You don't want the residue on there. And that is the fastest way, with that good 2-inch radius, to come up with 4 identical legs. Now, it's a good idea to leave them together and sand those profiles identically when they're together. But the other thing is, using the same idea here, we've joined the 2 little stretchers that get cut 5 degrees here, 5 degrees there at the miter saw later. And this needs to be notched. And what happens, you cut the notch out with both pieces together, and then what you can do is flip them around and they'll lock together. Let's get that done. Want to lower that guide assembly and lock it in place. Be sure to lock that column and just notch this out. 1/4 inch 6-tooth blade. I just want to take the line. Straight in. Now I swing that cut around the bend to the far corner, and then I can turn it off. Okay, let's see how all this comes together. And this double-sided tape is really strong stuff. Really holds all the parts together, and it makes them identical. And you can now see the way that notches together, and that's just perfect, top and bottom. Now, again, that's 5-degree miters on each end for all the angles to come together. But this piece now needs to be notched out in the middle. This is the rail. And these curves are up on one side, down on the other. You'll see why in a second. I'll get this notch cut out. To save time, I've already taken the tape off, and you can see that the long table rails notched together. See that curve right there? Well, that has to match that curve. If those curves are cut when these are stacked together like this, then the curves won't work. It would be in reverse. This is a 1-inch radius that is laid in so that the arch is always down towards the floor. So I'll just cut these out, and then it's off to assemble all the parts. These are loose tenons going into mortises. It's called the domino system. And see how that slips in? And then there's the mating mortise, and that's at that 5-degree angle. Remember, everything on this project is 5 degrees. The foot, the angle there, the angle at the top is cut at 5 degrees. And so as I walk around the bend, you'll start to see how this entire project really comes together, because it's these loose tenons that really do the job. This is fabulous the way this comes in. Now that's just done with the domino machine to make that cut. I don't have to set it at a bizarre angle. Let me put that little piece in right there so you can see the whole assembly process. And most of the times, these dominoes or tenons get glued. But in this case, okay, right like that, this whole assembly gets glued, just like that. But over here, this top rail right here, the interface here does not get glued, and you'll see why later on. This does get glued. And to make the domino cut, I'm using the machine with that cutter that really moves back and forth to make this cut. I'll make the cut, and then I'll show you the process. So I just lay the cutter right up on my layout line, hold it steady. This is an extra board clamp, and this is all clamped down. Press it until it stops, turn it off, and this is on a time delay. That shuts off, and you can see how this extra scrap with that 5-degree angle right there just gives me more support on the face of the domino cutter so that I get a perfect domino there. And that's to go into, let's see, it goes around like that, this face right here. And to do this face, what I'm going to do is clamp this down like so. These auto action clamps are really nice. No screwing to adjust. Right on the line. I line up the cursor there. No changes in setting. As long as I keep this fence and this plate flat, it gives me a perfect cut. And that's the other half of the joint. Now I need to come down to this side and do the same over here. I always like to have 2 clamps to help steady it. And here we go. Now one more cut to make, and then I can go on to the glue up. Make sure the cursor on the plastic clear sight plate is right on your layout line. That centers up the mortise as the domino cutter makes the elliptical mortise. And from there, it's on to doing the glue up. So everything gets taken apart first. And then I use an acid brush to liberally brush in glue, yellow wood glue, into the mortises. And I don't put any glue on the dominoes because these tenons, well, as you push them in, if there was any glue on the domino, it would just screed right off, and it would really just put too much glue on the interface of the surface. And then once the glue is sized in all the dominoes, it's onto a very special clamp up. So everything is coming together beautifully. Okay, when the angles are cut properly, there are no gaps as you draw everything together. There's glue here on this piece. And as I swing this over, this piece has the notch up. That's critical because this piece that notches into it has to be locked in place with this piece when it's screwed to the bottom of the round table. Now this piece only gets glue here and here, not on the top. And the reason for that is so you can do this right here like that and take those notches and lock them together. Those are the notches that we made at the bandsaw. So you press it until all 4 feet are flat. And now this piece, without glue ever, in these loose floating domino tenons, comes up, locks in just like that. And once you have that done that way, the whole table can be disassembled in time. Now, because this is angled right here, it could be a bear to clamp unless you do it this way. You use this type of clamp with the nice rubber pad, and you lock the bar underneath the cross piece, and as you draw this in and squeeze that joint tight, see that squeeze out? And by doing it this way, you don't have to do fancy clamping jigs or fixtures because the bars lock themselves in place. And then this piece right here needs a clamp down, like so. Oops, longer clamp. And we'll let all of this cure out and get nice and dry. And as that's happening, let's go over and route the tabletop. And a couple other things here. There's a non-slip carpet pad right there. And it's well inside the edge of this circle. I clamp this down. Never route without clamping. And now, because the rotation's going this way, I'm feeding from left to right on the outside edge. Start it, make the cut, do the same on both sides, you're done. You know, patience is a virtue, and this is the most virtuous person I know, and her finishing technique is grand. So, Susie, take it away. I'm going to get to sanding.
I really love the finish that we chose. We used a Danish oil and a golden oak mixed 50-50 with walnut, and it gives it that perfect arts and craft look. I mean, this table looks like it's 50 years old, and I just put the finish on. So I'm going to flip it over. That was the bottom. And I'm going to start applying this, and you can really see the magic happen. And I'm going to go with the grain. And once I brush it in, then I'll wipe it off once it really soaks in to get that good penetration. Because with this Danish oil, it really penetrates. It's not going to chip, crack, anything. It's going to be beautiful. Looking good. Well, the finish is all dry. Scott's just getting the rest of this done. In a few days, once it's really dried and cured out, I'll put a clear coat of clear Danish oil.
Okay, now, whatever you do, when you flip this assembly over, and she put spacers an inch back from the edge on these rails here, counterbore it and put the proper screw into that pilot hole. And remember, the way this is done, we can take this apart just by screwing this apart and taking the loose tenons out, and away we go. So let's take a look at the finished project here.
Beautiful.
Oh yeah, I want it to be at rest as you look at that grain.
Look at that. Woo! That is so beautiful.
So much fun.
Yeah.
And this is perfect by a couch to set your drinks, your meals down low, 23 inches to the top like that. So I think it's a winner.
I do too. It's perfect.
Okay, well that's it for season 25. I can't imagine it in my wildest dreams.
Thanks to all the viewers and to the PBS stations. We greatly appreciate it. It's been a great ride.
Every blessing. See you next season. Go figure. Beautiful.
Woodcraft, since 1928, providing traditional and modern woodworking tools and supplies to generations of craftsmen. Woodcraft, helping you make wood work.
For every woodworking reason, for every woodworking age. Rycon Power Tools, pro tools for everyone. RyconTools.com, proud supporters of American woodshops everywhere. Woodcraft Magazine, projects, plans, and web links designed to help you make wood work. PS Wood, home of Timberwolf Swedish silicon steel bandsaw blades and super sharp scroll saw blades. A bed to sleep on. A table to share meals. A house that feels like a home. the Furniture Bank of Central Ohio, providing furniture to neighbors in need.
For more information behind the scenes at the American Woodshop, go to our website for complete details on tips and like us on Facebook.